Hi, Phillip. Welcome to Lights of Life podcast series, and thank you for joining us. So, my name is Haran. I would like to introduce Phillip. He is actually a doctor, modern day sage, and a healer, and he's also an author. And he does so many amazing things, and I'm really someone I really look up to him, and I also look at he has a lot of videos and seminars and workshops. He's also teaching meditations as well. So that's something that you can look for in his page. So at the end of this session, I will actually, when I post this seminar, I will actually put all the information about his website, his Facebook page, Instagram, and all other information. So those of you who are interested, get in touch with him and connect with him. He has an awesome energy, and he's actually trying to grow some beard. I was also thinking, because I know Phillip for a while now, about probably 15 years plus now, and we got into each other's through music actually. But I don't want to talk too much. So tell us about yourself, Phillip. Dr. Phil.
Thank you. That was quite an introduction. I've known you, Haran, for as you said, quite some time. My family, we come from Sri Lanka, and I was born here. My family, they used to get into the music, the cultural music scene here in Melbourne. So some of the Sri Lankans, they used to get together and do concerts and things like that. And I met Haran through there when I was a young boy. I was maybe 12 years old, I think.
Yeah.
And you were quite young as well. You were in your early 20s. You're a little bit older than me.
Yeah.
But yeah, back then I was just a kid, fulfilling the whatever my parents wanted for me, which was to study hard and get an education. And I studied. I went overseas. I became a doctor. And whilst all of those things was happening, my family also got into their own problems. They had severe financial losses, and father became very unstable as well mentally. And there are a lot of things that come up with that, especially in our society, our cultural society is, putting up a face because we don't want people to judge us and that sort of thing. So all of these things were going on in my family. And when I came back after my studies, I felt like I got into this big mess. I lost my motivation and drive, and I started becoming depressed, and that actually led me to become more spiritual. I suppose I searched for my happiness in finding meaning to what all of this was. Why are all these bad things happening? And as I started exploring, I met certain people that shared their spiritual insights about life. And I began having my own experiences. I started noticing how everything is connected. There is some kind of connection through our mind, through our thoughts, through our spirit, and the physical world. And so here I am now. I feel like I'm here for a purpose. Perhaps when I was a child, it was something that I sort of knew that I was here to do, but now that I've gone through certain things in life, forgotten about all of that, I've come back to it, and I feel like now I'm here to spread my message, or to spread my energy, and that is really to connect with this thing called love. That's actually the only thing that matters, and it's not just love as a word. It's more than that. It's like this unconditional nature and an acceptance and a humility and an understanding.
And it's very strong. Like when I meet you and when I talk to you, that energy actually comes out, and that's very strong as well. And I believe, as a person, as a being who's actually helping other people to go through this path, or if I don't know if I can even call that as a path, but when you are there to help other people, that particular energy is very important. Like that love, compassion, and kindness is very important. Rather than it becomes a word, but it becomes your whole beings, and I felt that in you.
Yeah, that I would say it's something that it's always been my nature as a child.
Yeah.
I've always been the type of person that I actually don't speak so much, even though I'm speaking a lot now. But I'm someone that I'm usually quiet, and I'll listen to what people are saying, and I'll just try to make other people happy. Like I just try to be nice to them, and then it wasn't until I got older that I began to understand perhaps there's a reason why I'm the way that I am.
Yeah.
And is that to express myself in this way.
Yeah, definitely. Even when we were practicing music, my Shango will be yelling, or someone is yelling. You're always smiling and quiet, and you'll play the keyboard, and you're pretty pleasant to be around. Not just because you are quiet, but you had this strong, that strong energy around you, that aura, that it's always pleasant to be around you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And I think how did you actually get into music? Like I was very curious. I know your mom actually sings, and she loves music. And then I used to sing together on the stage, and that's how I met you as well. And I played. Your uncle also plays guitar, and he does a lot of work as well. He's a musician as well, so that is in your blood as well. But other than that, for you personally, how did you get into music?
Well, my mum actually got me to start learning piano when I was about 8 years old.
Yeah.
And it was more like, I suppose she was a bit strict with me that I should do it. And then I gave it up after about 5 years. But it always stayed with me. I love listening to music because it just makes you feel a certain way. Music is like emotion. And I started my favorite songs. I would just listen to the notes, and I would try to figure them out on the keyboard. And now it's just evolved into something where I actually would like to sing and make music, combined with my own spiritual understandings of things. And because to my understanding, it's music itself is a vibration, and if you can put your heart and soul into it as well, it can be actually healing for people. So but more so I would say it's also because my family is very musical, and whenever we have like family gatherings, we'll have either if it's a birthday party or Christmas or something, or the family would get around, and my cousin, it's not my uncle, it's my cousin, he's a bit older than me, he would bring out the guitar and the mic, and all of our, my mum's siblings, they would all gather around and they would sing songs. And it's things that they used to do back home in Sri Lanka as well. So it's always been a thing that we've always done, and that just got imparted in me somehow.
And I remember getting into a competition once, and your mom was singing, your aunt was singing, and I can't remember who else from your family was singing there in that competition. It's called Pata. It means like you sing, and there'll be a bell ringing, and then whatever the letter that the bell rings. So if it finishes with for example, then you have to start singing in a song starts with So I remember it's also like part of the culture as well, getting around together and singing and having these kind of things around. And I also I can relate to what you're saying about healing as well, music being healing. Because when I first started, music was actually a healing for me. That was the only venue that I had. And when I went through that healing, after I actually gone past that, like I think I shared that with you, that I went through, depression, and I was suicidal and all that as well at one point in my life. At that particular time, I would listen to music, any kind of music, all the time. And then when I gone past that, I felt like I didn't need to have music in my life. I still enjoy and I still listen to music as well, but not for the same reason, because that healing had been already done, and I feel like that really helped me a lot, but I don't feel like holding on to that. Did you ever feel like that in your life?
I guess like part of doing music as well is there's this, you want to perfect something, you want your voice to sound good, you want to play correctly, and that also comes with your ego. Like, it's so like, why am I doing music? Is because I want people to see me,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us do that, like because we want to feel worthy for something. So a lot of the reasons why I would get into music as well is, people would look at me and, I'd feel good about myself. And then when you start going down that path, then you don't enjoy music much because you're not doing it for the right reasons. So that's happened with me. I suppose now it's a matter of just trying to focus on how do I feel when I'm playing the music or when I'm connecting with it, and if it actually makes me feel like amazing. That's and not having expectations to what can come from that.
Yeah. So at what point in your life things have changed for you? Like, I know you were talking about you going through depression and you were worrying too much about different things in your life, and you became a doctor. I know, like, when I was at uni, or when I started working, I heard you got into biomedical science and you were studying at La Trobe or somewhere, or Monash or somewhere. I can't remember exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I was doing medical science at La Trobe. Yeah.
Yeah, because we had some common friends as well, so they were saying, and then you actually went into medicine, and then you completed medicine. And then when you finished medicine, now you are not really practicing medicine, but you are still healing people out there, in different ways. So at what point in your life you decided, okay, this is what I want to do. I don't want to practice medicine, but I want to do something else.
I think it was when I began to realize that connecting with who we understand God to be, that is the greatest power. That supersedes everything. And I couldn't live with the idea that if I'm going to heal people, because I believe I was born to be a healer.
Yeah.
Me being a doctor and prescribing meds and using conventional forms of medicine just didn't agree with me. There's something inside me that was saying I can't do it. And it was creating so much resistance that I just had to go the other way. That was something that no one understood at the time, especially my family. It was very absurd because I spent all of this time studying, and even some of the friends that you've mentioned, and if they're watching this, they'll know that when we were younger, I used to talk about it all the time, and I'd be like, I'm going to be a doctor. It was my dream to do it. But then once I got into the medical system, I realized it wasn't all that it appears to be.
Yeah. I think I was watching Jay Shetty recently, and he was talking about, in our culture, you either have to be a doctor or engineer or failure. So just looking at you becoming a doctor and then giving that away, it must have been really challenging for you, especially with the family and, people around you questioning and giving you hard time all the time, pretty much. How did you handle that?
that now I laugh about it, But back then it was horrible. Like I used to have friends that would come and sit me down, like we'd have a coffee, and they'd be like, "What are you doing? You know, you should be doing this, you should be doing that." And I couldn't explain to them because the experiences that I was having is not something that you can explain or make sense to a person. It's just a personal thing, you know. So I had to just basically just nod my head and say, yes, okay. Sometimes I resisted. I tried to explain my understanding of things and no one would understand what I was trying to say. My family probably was the hardest because that impacted them the most. I think they had a lot of expectation for me. And I mentioned, you know, there's a lot of financial hardship and loss around my family. So there was an expectation that, you know, I would work as a doctor and the family would start to be looked upon in our community as in a better light. But that didn't happen because I started following the spiritual path, and that raised questions. People were asking my family, what is your son doing? Is he getting married? Why isn't he working? You know, so all of these things, and then that would then come back to me, you know, the frustration and, you know, why is my son not doing, and then that would create frustration in me because I would be like, well, you know, it's because you have forced me to be a certain way and to want me to be a doctor, and it's not coming from the purest things. You didn't let me to be free. And so all of these things started coming out, and I had to learn. What I found in the spiritual journey is really to make peace with all of those things and to see the gift in all of it. There is a gift, you know, especially when things get to be challenging.
I think to have that understanding and reflecting on that and being true to yourself needs a lot of courage. I didn't do medicine, but I actually got into I did business, and then I started working in the accounting field. And I went through similar kind of experience as well with the family because I didn't want to do that. And I was exploring a few different options, and, you know, I learned clinical hypnosis. I started teaching meditation and started doing healing work and things like that as well. And then did so many different things where it wasn't the conventional way of, you know, going to work and getting married and all those kind of stuff, you know, ticking all the boxes. I wasn't doing any of that. So I was going through a lot of challenges as well. So do you get questions like, oh, when you're getting married, things like that?
I used to get it a lot, but I think my family they made their peace as well with it. And what's funny about that is the more that I stopped resisting what was coming and I just accepted, I found that they started to conform as well to what I was to all of it. So they don't ask me so much. I think they surrendered. They let go.
Good.
And now I've everything that I've studied. It's not to say that I've, you know, discarded any of that. I've actually used that in a different way, which is to honor this. Let's say my understanding of what life truly means. And I believe, especially in the health, in dealing with matters of the health, a lot of it comes down to the power of the mind and how our bodies are connected to that, and even understanding that we are not just a human body and mind. We're more than that too, and that perhaps is the source of connection that gives us our power.
How do you feel about marriage and all that? Like, what's your understanding and what's your opinion about marriage?
So, I mean, most people, why do people get married? Perhaps it's because of social expectations. We think that this is something that we need to do. So, we get born into an environment, into a culture, and that's all we seem to know. So we just follow that. But then what happens when you get married? If you're just getting married for the sake of tradition, or what rules are around your cultural understandings of all of that, there are underlying things within you that start to come out. If you're in a relationship, because a relationship is a serious thing. You're agreeing to honor the person's journey and that person to hold you as well. But often when you get married for the wrong reasons, it creates more conflict and there's no understanding. And that's why a lot of people, I would say today, most of the population on the planet, they move towards divorce and separation, that sort of thing. Marriage is, if we're looking from this perspective of spirit, marriage is just a term that we use to bond two people together. It doesn't have to be written on paper.
Exactly.
If you have a connection with someone, then that's the only thing that matters, and you know how true that is. So that is my understanding of it. That actually contradicts a lot of beliefs in my family, because you have to get married and you have to have a ceremony and all of these things. But the question is, why do we do these things? Why have a ceremony? Why get married at this age, and what's the purpose of all of that? Well, maybe if I ask the question, is because I want to feel like, our family is well respected, pass on a legacy. All of these things are material, or they're all just they're not things that you carry with you when you die. They're just temporary things.
That's true. And when we think about marriage, it's a very personal thing. If two person want to get married, that's okay too. But however, I think in the old days, maybe people get married for different reasons. It could be the economical reason, cultural reasons, or physically, for physical reasons, emotional reasons, or so many other reasons. However, nowadays I feel like those reasons are really redundant in many ways, where a lot of things are not really applicable. Like, most men and women are really independent and they can live together if they want to, or they can live by themselves if they want to as well. We have that freedom nowadays, and although also that safety and security, and most women are men and women are equal to each other, and we are all working, and we can look after ourselves as well. Like, I'm talking in terms of marriage. Well, I feel like it's not necessary unless those two people wanted to get married.
I actually believe that there is a soul that you're meant to have a partnership with. If that's dependent on the person or the journey of the soul. But for me personally, I do believe that, and that can come in any way or form. That can only happen by being honest with yourself and not conforming to things. Just living your life and trusting in the divine, and that should be enough. And in a sense, it's like this idea of loving yourself so much that you don't need anyone, and that you cultivate so much love that it should actually bring forth everything that you want, including the right partner. And that partner would be so great that you wouldn't need any label to describe what it is. You would just know that this person is me, and that's enough.
So how is it different for you now practicing, like teaching meditation, and also helping people in different ways, doing healing work and things like that, and then the conventional medicine? What's the difference?
Well, there are studies that are going on now that explain how your emotions is connected to cellular function. So it's known as epigenetics. And there are those that speak about life, about the nature of life from a quantum understanding, that everything in our reality is coming from one divine source. And really, scientifically speaking, it's just all atoms, molecules, vibrations. If all of that is true, then that means that we can make anything happen simply through our awareness of our being. And from my understanding to this point, there is some connection between our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions and what gets attracted into our life. And so in terms of the health field, it would be the same, except you're sending messages to your body and the body responds. I mean, there are examples just from a logical perspective, how when you're stressed, you have hormones that get stimulated in your body, stress hormones or adrenaline. An example is when you're stressed in a physical situation, which is, there might be a life-threatening thing that occurs, be it an animal or a tiger is about to maul you. And in that moment, you don't think. Your body begins to respond. Your heart starts to race. You have adrenaline start pumping in. There are hormones released through the brain, through the hypothalamus, and through the adrenal glands, and all of these things. And then all of a sudden you remove yourself from the environment. At the same time, though, the rest of the functions of the body get neglected because it's not needed in that moment. What's needed is to protect your body in that circumstance. But what studies are suggesting now is that when you're stressed, just about bills or just day-to-day things that frustrate you, conversations with people, family members, all of this stuff, it mimics the same thing, except now instead of a one-time situation, it's happening all the time. And so if you're releasing hormones within your body and it decreases your immune system and it does all of these things, then chronically over a period of time, it starts to impact your health. So just from that logical perspective, that's how powerful our mind is and our emotions. It's all connected in some sort of way. But this is not something that conventional medicine brings awareness to, because it's more of a band-aid approach, in my opinion. As part of the reason why I couldn't work as a medical professional is because you have an illness, you just give some meds and then that's it. It doesn't address the underlying issue. And the underlying issue is the way that you're understanding life, and how you show up to it.
And I'm sure. I think you're familiar with this as well. I think we talked about it when you were actually doing the podcast with me a few months back, where we were talking about how using certain language or even just emotions with plants, the plants are actually growing. Like you can just go to one plant and you can swear and say bad things to one plant and then say really loving and very nice things to another plant, and then the level of their growth are totally different. One can just die just because you said negative things to the plant. And same thing, you can do it with water as well, because water stores information, where Dr. Emoto was actually doing that research, and he proved that how water stores information, and our body is actually more than 70% is water. So we store information and how we can heal ourselves as well using our thoughts and emotions and things like that, and energy pretty much. So it's good that you're actually talking about that as well, because still, like, I noticed that for a lot of people it's just hocus pocus when you talk about it, even though there are a lot of scientific research and studies coming through. As a doctor and also practicing this energy medicine and also just doing all these things, how would you convince someone who doesn't really believe in these things?
So that's So that's part of actually the challenge that I'm going through at the moment is so I work as a spiritual carer in a cancer hospital, and part of that is, you know, I'm seeing all of these people who have been diagnosed with illnesses that they've been told are incurable. I've tried, you know, sharing these understandings with people, but they just, if you're in a space of mind where you're focusing on illness and what the worst can happen and the fear surrounding all of those things, no matter what a person says, they're not going to listen. The best way to get a person to be aware of these things is just to be a living example of it, and that is just this nature of being loving. So it comes back to that, because if all of this is true, and you mentioned Dr. Emoto's work, and you know, the hormones of stress and all of these things, if it's connected with our emotions, then what is the greatest emotion? It's love. And so sometimes you don't have to actually say things to people. All you have to do is, it might be just a kind gesture. It might be just listening to a person and what pains and sorrows that they have gone through in their life, including if they're faced with a terminal illness of some sort. Just being there for them, that might be enough. That might be the seed that's needed for them to either get out of it, or maybe they're not meant to, because I do believe that all of us also have a certain path in life, and it's all of a learning process. A person can't just step in and say, oh, you should learn like this. It's up to the individual to learn themselves. Otherwise, what's the purpose of us being here on Earth? For me, Earth is like a school. You know, all of these souls come here and they birth themselves here to learn more about themselves, and that goes into this idea of free will. That what is free will is allowing the person to come to their own conclusions.
So you're just allowing the person to go through their own learnings, and because it's all about learnings as well, isn't it? Like, it is just going through that learning and growing from that.
And sometimes it's the most difficult thing to do, because if you, based on your own understandings of things, if you see a person that's in suffering, you want to take that person out of the suffering, right? It's just natural. But some of the I would say it takes a lot out of if you do have that perspective, you have to be able to actually get out of the way and allow that person to go through their pain, because that might be the thing that they need in that moment.
Yes. That's one of the things that I went through, where when I learned all these healings and hypnosis, neuro-linguistic programming and all other stuff, I wanted to actually kind of rescue everyone, you know, all my family and friends and everyone, and say, hey, I've got something, I can help you out. But then people are not ready, really. Like, they not willing to even listen, or they will be really suffering, and you know, they don't really have to go through that. They can simply come out of those sufferings that they're going through just by using certain techniques and tools. And these techniques and tools are there, but they're not willing to look into that. So I learned it in a hard way. Maybe we just have to allow them to go through their own learnings, and when they're ready, they will come to you. Where, you know, just it can be really challenging, and also I can see myself. You know, sometimes my own ego comes through. Like, you know, I can help them. Well, I can't help them. These tools can help, but then it's up to them if they wanted to use that in their life. So it's just putting it out there and saying, hey, I'm here to help you out. I can really help you, but unless they reach out to me, then I just leave it there. It can be really hard as well, because people are suffering, but you're sitting there, you can't really do anything about it, even though you can.
Well, yeah, and what I've found is that the more that you live in your own expression, that becomes a living example of it. And and that person might, you never know, that person might actually see the things that you're doing, and they may not say anything, but they will take something from that. That might be what's needed for them to change things around. So you just being yourself is enough, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, it took me a while to realize that, to be honest. Yeah. What are the learnings for you at this stage in your life? What are the learnings that you have? Probably you can share a few different learnings that you had, very important learnings in your life.
I think the biggest one has been with my family, and learning to accept and not trying to change people around me, and not blaming things, because that has been a massive theme in my life. When things don't go right in the way that we think life should go,
yes,
because this happens even in spirituality. Like, all right, I'm spiritual now, I want to make a career out of this, and it has to be this way, but then you're doing the same thing again. And when things don't go right based on that belief, then we start blaming or pointing fingers. Oh, it's this person told me this and that, and that's why my mind has changed, and it's just another form of. Yeah. So I was battling that, and what I found was I'm just creating more resistance for myself. Because when you're in that state, you can't think clearly, you don't feel inspired. It comes back to, I've learned to learn what the meaning of unconditional love is. That is that even if it's painful, and even if people are saying things to you or they're expressing themselves in a certain way, is how can I actually not take that to heart, but to love that as well, and to respect it. How do you respect something that might be even hateful thrown towards you? But you have to be able to do that, because the nature of God is that God lives and permeates, so exists through everything, even the hate. So you have to be able to love that too. And that has been the biggest challenge, and it's a never-ending process as well, because I found that once you think that you've dealt with one thing, something else comes up in life and it challenges you even more, and how more willing are you to love that?
Yeah, it's like a different layers layers that you have to peel off, isn't it? Like, yeah. I struggled with that a lot, like even with some of my friends, because I'm not doing the conventional way of, I'm not living that kind of life. So some of my friends sometimes mock me and, say things really hurtful as well, like especially when you just boys gather together, and then it becomes kind of weird sometimes, like in a way, because some of them get together and start to challenge me about all these things. So in a very aggressive way sometimes. So I find that can be difficult sometimes. So how would you handle that? Like, I had some incidents where some of them were really aggressive, but they were trying to kind of impose their own opinion in an aggressive way with me, where I was able to say, this is what I want, this is what I went through, this is not my belief, but these are the things that I lived through. So it is not, I'm not believing in God, but I experienced God, you know what I mean? Like, it's one thing believing in God, but experiencing God is a different thing. And it's one thing that somebody says, oh, this can be healed, but one thing that you actually do some healing work with people, and then they heal themselves really rapidly just because of certain things that you do. For you live through that, you have that experience, but then for others, they're not really open-minded. They have a very rigid way of thinking. They can't think beyond that, but then still they challenge you. How would you handle those kind of people? Does it make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And I've come across that many times as well. And many times I felt like I've been the odd one out in conversations or in groups.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the reasons why that happened was because I when you have spiritual insight to things, the tendency that happened with me was um, my truth is more correct, and so I have to honor that, and I have to speak that, even if people disagree with what I have to say. What I found when I was doing that was people just thought I was being arrogant and and that sort of stuff, and it creates more. It just there's no harmony in that. You don't connect with the person. I what I found is I had to let go of even that. So I had to say, well, how can I find what this person is saying is truthful, and how can I nurture what he's saying? So if something is thrown to me aggressively, then it's more like I accept that aggression and I understand it, and I'm okay with it, and I'm just looking for another way to connect with you.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I do perhaps the insight and what I want to share with a person. I don't share it because I believe that the universe would just make that apparent for that person just through being loving. Because I feel like the vibration of being love is so powerful that it reveals itself in the moment, and that's something that's unavoidable. So even if a person is being aggressive, that person, it depends on what they allow themselves to see, but there's some things that you see that you can't not see, and things of the supernatural nature, the flow and the synchronicities of life, which is some of the experiences that I connect in with understanding how God can be materially understood through some of those experiences. But things like that I found appears when you have the resilience and the persistence to be loving and trusting that God will come through for you.
How did you get into, I know that you are, your family's Christians. So how did you get into these meditation? Sometimes I find it a bit like, I can't generalize everyone, but I'm just asking, because some of the Christians don't want to meditate, they don't want to talk about healings and things like that. However, you got into healings and you got into meditation and you do a lot of spiritual work. How did you get into that? I know you talked about depression, you going through depression, but how did you actually connect with this part of spirituality?
Well, I met a group of people. It started with a mentor that I had, and what they basically said was, and these are people that have very psychic abilities and connectedness to things that it'd be very hard to dispute. They were able to reveal truths to me that I couldn't deny that it was true, of the spiritual nature. So basically what they were saying was that there's something greater that's at play on the planet and in the universe, or perhaps in this universe, which is that God as it is just expressing himself through all things, but there is a theme to what's happening on the planet, and there is a history of what's happened on the planet as well, which is that there are beings that came here from time to time, and they would come as a human being, and they would enlighten the world with their understandings of God. And in those days, we're talking thousands and thousands of years. Perhaps not everyone was open to it, but today we're in a world where most people are now waking up to this, to that there is more to life than it appears. And what these mentors were saying to me was, there are a lot of these souls that have been born here on the planet that are waking up to their own existence, and it's all to raise the consciousness, raise the awareness of the and what happens when you have more awareness and more when you raise your consciousness and the whole planet itself is the direction in which things, the world that we live in, starts to change. So we don't become destructive, we become constructive. Things evolve much faster from a heart-centered place where we don't see separation anymore, but we're all one unit, and we're all part of the one. And in that, a lot of gifts can come. We can live in a world where we're all of perfect health. We all are free in our financial wealth and abundance. We can make anything happen. We can have anything that we want. We can create anything that we want. This can only, and these are things that have been spoken about in many religious doctrines. Not just, I was brought up as a Christian, but also in other religious forms. It's all they all talk about a time when humanity would enlighten themselves to seeing who they really are and where they came from. Yeah. And so, in this understanding, I began to have my own experiences, and I believe that I am here, and it's not even just a belief, it's more of a knowing that I am here for that purpose, to be an expression of myself, to contribute to raising the consciousness of the planet.
Yeah. Good. And I thought I would talk to you about your book. It's behind you.
Yes, yeah.
A copy of your book.
There it is, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your book, The Simple Truth.
Well, my book is about my life story. It starts before I was born. In Sri Lanka, there was a civil war, and my family went through a lot of losses. My parents came to Australia, and they started their life here from scratch, and then they started bringing family members to migrate here to escape the war there. Yeah. And I write about how I was experiencing all of those things, seeing how my parents struggled, and how my spiritual understandings began to evolve through those experiences. And what I found was there are some principles that I've always followed, which I call vibrations or frequencies of connecting to the source. And that is, for example, humility. What is humility? It's another form of love. It's the willingness to listen and learn. And why that is so important is because just on a fundamental level, if everything is if everything is just energy, then you paying attention to anything and everything in your reality, whether it's a person or a situation or thing, you're able to extract more information from that, because everything comes from the divine. Yeah. But we don't do that. That is, sometimes pride gets in the way. We want to preserve the persona that we've built, but we deny ourselves more information and the more of the true nature of who we are, which is that we are all God. So I speak on, and I use some of my life experiences as to how I came to that conclusion, and then just other practices as well, like what it is, how do you actually cultivate faith? I've found that cultivating faith comes from understanding on some level, trusting in the unknown. And the first faith is actually trusting in the unknown, trusting in something that you can't see, because God is something that exists in a place where perhaps you can't see. You have to be able to sense Him in a way. Yeah. Yet as a human being, we find this very difficult to fathom. So sometimes to get ourselves there, we can use things like religious doctrines or scientific knowledge to develop this understanding that it makes it easier to trust in something as the unknown. And I use my understanding of physics, that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, which is the same way as karma, which is what goes around comes around. Whatever vibration you put out comes back to you, which is the law of attraction. You reap what you sow. So all of these things are interconnected. They're all different ways of expressing the same thing. And in understanding that, in my perspective, that all things are energy and vibrations and frequencies, and that we are all the time, through our thoughts and our emotions, we're putting out a frequency, because everything is actually us. We bring those things into our reality. Things get mirrored back into our reality according to what we're thinking and feeling. And as we pay more attention to this phenomenon, if you do see the correlation between your thoughts, your feelings and emotions, and what transpires in your life, then you see there's a pattern here, that I actually am the creator of my reality, and I'm, which means that you have nothing to be sad about, because you're always creating everything. So my book explores all of this and how you can actually get into this space of being free, because if you can develop and cultivate a freedom within yourself, then what should arise from that is you should be able to attract those things back into your life. And there are these practices that have been taught through religious dogmas, which is just forgiveness, very basic things, understanding, compassion, humility, being grateful. All of these things, we perhaps, most of us don't pay attention to these things, but there is actually a fundamental reason to it, and it connects us to the source, to the source that we are. And there's a consciousness or realization that comes from that when you dedicate yourself to these practices. So in a nutshell, that is my book. I go through chapter by chapter all of these vibrations of practice.
So how can we get your book?
You can go on Amazon, and you can purchase it there, or you can go on my website and there's a PDF version of it which you can get for free, or you can purchase it from a store that I'm selling my book. It's called Angel's Realm. It's in Essendon. Yeah.
Nice. And it sounds like a lot of learnings from that, from your book. Like there's a lot of different perspective and learnings that we can get from your book, definitely, based on what you told me just now. And I want to ask you a very important question. What's the secret to your beard? Sorry, I never saw you with a beard before. You sometimes have very, thin lines and all that. But yeah, for the first time.
Yeah. I actually did a podcast with a person. He calls himself the Rising Man, and he talks about the rising masculine energy. What does it mean to be a man? And I realized that for a long time I was just a boy, which is I'd listen to my parents, listen to my family, and try to please them. And I felt like I had to embody this man energy of me. I had to become a man, because it's one thing to have all of this spiritual insight and knowledge, but to be able to go out into the world and express that, I have to be a man about it and do it with authority. And the beard is just an expression of me becoming a man. So that's why I did it. Aside from that, I am also going bald, and it's just another addition to making myself look creative. So
good. Is there any other message or anything else you would like to share?
just emphasizing love. That's the only thing that really matters. And it's not just as simple as saying it. It's more like, how can I be loving in every moment? And I can tell you that that's the only thing that matters. It's the source of creation itself. And you can make sense of that because everything that we do comes from love. And even when we're in pain, it's because we're searching for this love. We want to be loved ourselves. It's the only thing that really matters. And the sooner that we get to that place, that's when we become free. And there's some magic that comes from it. Which is not something that can be described. It's just in your own personal experience. You see it for yourself, and by that stage, it doesn't even matter. All you want to do is just see how you can be more loving in every situation and circumstance. And even if a situation isn't loving, to learn how I can be more loving in that. And that's my message.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you are an embodiment of that, definitely. And I felt that, like, even as a boy, as a child, when you were around us, when we were performing and all that, you were that as well already. And it's good to have it in your awareness and consciously radiating that from you. So that's very good message. And thank you for your time. And can you tell us your website detail? What's your website?
Yes, it's theworldrevolution.com.
Yeah.
And you can find me on Facebook as well, under Phillip Alexander. And on Instagram, I'm The World Revolution. You can search that, the.world.revolution. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I'm also just kind of getting used to your name because I use your Tamil name, Ajit, instead of Philip. So I just, sometimes my brain kind of goes, is it Philip or Ajit? And I'm like, okay, I'll call him Philip because that's how everyone knows you. And but yeah, anyway, I think name doesn't matter anyway. But Phillip Alexander, thank you for your time, and have a good day.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.